Imagine, if you will, a universe where the absolute most precious commodity you could possibly possess isn't gold.
Right, definitely not gold.
Yeah, and it's not oil either. It's not diamonds or rare earth metals. It's water. Just
Ah,
plain, simple, life-giving water.
which is wild to think about, just basic water.
Exactly. Now, I want you to picture yourself living in that universe on a planet that is basically an endless, lethal desert.
A completely hostile environment.
Right, a place where the sun is just this hammer, the sand is like a razor, and people routinely, agonizingly die of dehydration.
It's just a brutal, everyday reality for them.
Totally. And outside the walls of the capital city, the local population literally worships moisture. Like, they measure their wealth in droplets.
Reclaiming the moisture from their own breath.
Yeah, their breath, their sweat, just to survive another day. But then inside the walls, the planetary ruler flaunts his unimaginable wealth in the most absurd way possible.
Oh, this scene. It's so visceral.
It really is. He washes his hands in a basin, takes a damp, dripping wet hand towel, and casually tosses it onto the floor.
Just throws it away.
Just throws it away. The water slowly evaporates into the climate-controlled air, completely wasted, while people just outside those walls are literally dying of thirst.
It is such a staggering visual. I mean, it's immediately offensive to our basic survival instincts.
Oh, absolutely. It makes you angry just thinking about it.
Right. And the beauty of that single image is that it tells you absolutely everything you need to know about the power dynamics there.
Yeah, the cruelty of it all.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
cruelty and the fundamental disconnect at play in that exact moment. It's really a masterclass in showing, rather than telling, how absolute power insulates itself.
Insulates itself from the reality of the world it governs. Welcome to this deep dive, everyone.
I'm so glad you're joining us today.
Yes, buckle in because we are embarking on a really massive, expansive journey today. Our mission is to explore this incredibly rich stack of source materials.
Some really fascinating stuff in here.
We're looking at specific, highly detailed textual excerpts and some intricate cartographic maps from the science fiction epic Dune, House Harkonnen.
Written by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson.
Right. But I want to set the parameters right at the top. This deep dive is not just a recap of a sci-fi story. We're treating this text as a profound sociological and ecological case study.
Because science fiction, I mean, at its absolute pinnacle, it's never just about spaceships or laser blasters.
They're alien planets.
Exactly. It's a mirror held up to our own history. It allows us to isolate variables like extreme resource scarcity or totalitarian architecture.
And just run a simulation, basically, to see how human nature responds.
Exactly that. It exposes our social structures and our fatal flaws by magnifying them to a planetary scale.
And the sources we have today give us the perfect lens to run that simulation. We're going to examine how extreme environments shape human resilience.
Both the indifferent cruelty of nature and, the meticulously manufactured cruelty of a ruling class.
Right. The manufactured cruelty is so key here. We're going to explore how these environments forge the spirit of rebellion in the dirt and the dark.
And crucially, we'll look at how they expose the fatal, almost comical blind spots of an elite class that believes they are untouchable.
Yeah, those blind spots are massive. So we're going to bounce between three drastically different worlds today.
Three very distinct ecosystems.
We've got the deadly, storm-ravaged deserts of Arrakis, the oppressive, oil-soaked agricultural trenches of Giedi Prime.
And the decadent, artificially insulated halls of the imperial rulers.
Right. The authors use geography and setting not just as a painted backdrop, It's an active, aggressive participant in the narrative.
The environment isn't where the story happens. The environment is the engine of the story.
I love that phrase, the engine of the story, because it really dictates the moral framework and the ultimate fate of every character we're going to dissect.
It really does. So where should we begin this dissection?
Let's start with our first major piece of evidence. Because before we even meet a single character, we really have to look at the ground they walk on.
The cartographic maps.
Yes, the maps. The source material includes several highly detailed maps of different planets in this galactic empire.
And looking at these, you instantly grasp why this book pulled in such high critical praise.
Oh, for sure. Like, the USA Today review highlights the rich interweaving of politics and plotting. And Publishers Weekly praises the myriad revelations.
The world building is just extraordinarily well developed. And that development begins with the cartography.
Because maps are never neutral documents, are they?
No, never. A map is essentially a political manifesto. It tells you what a society values, what they consider dangerous.
What they intend to exploit.
Exactly. And perhaps most importantly, what they choose to ignore. When you look at how a culture labels its terrain, you're looking directly into its collective psyche.
That is so true. And the contrasts in these source maps are jarring. I mean, let's look at the map of Caladan
And
first.
the ancestral fiefdom of House Atreides.
Right. You look at this map, and it is just bursting with natural, vibrant life.
Yeah, the geographic features are named with a sense of majesty.
Like river gorges, Agamemnon Canyon. We see vast oceans dotted with sea creature processing islands.
And the coral reefs are explicitly marked as coral gem beds.
And the agricultural zones are labeled as Pundi rice lowlands and Paradon melon farms. It just looks sustainable, you know?
It looks like a society that has figured out how to live in relative harmony with a water-rich world.
Right, a symbiotic relationship.
The nomenclature implies ecological stewardship. I mean, they're absolutely harvesting resources. They're a major political power.
Obviously, yeah. They have to make money.
But the map highlights the natural features themselves. The plains, the forests, the kelp farms.
Yeah.
The Atreides recognize that the planet's natural state is the source of their wealth.
So they manage it rather than strip mine it. But then we look at Lankaville.
Oh, Lankaville.
The map is wild. It's an ice planet, right?
Yeah, very harsh conditions.
You've got these massive northern and southern ice sheets, the Tula Fjord, and then these specific markers for the local economy.
Like the shallow water Jondax whale graveyard.
A whale for processing. It's a much harsher environment than Caladan, obviously, but it still feels like a natural geography.
Right. Humans are adapting to the ice and the whales. It's tough, but it makes sense.
But then you turn the page to the map of Giedi Prime.
And the psychological tone of the universe shifts violently.
It's like walking into an industrial nightmare. Looking at this map is like analyzing Earth's geopolitical maps during the Cold War.
But drafted by a cartoon supervillain who actively hates humanity.
Yes. I'm looking at these labels right now, and they are insane. Isle of Sorrows, Perdition Shallows,
Cliff of Death.
Sea of Ravens, Slave Pits, Gladiator Island. I mean, my immediate reaction is almost to laugh because it reads like a villain's mood board.
It really does sound like a joke at first glance.
Right. Like, who actually names the body of water next to their house the Perdition Shallows?
Nobody would choose that.
So, does naming a landscape so bleakly actually condition the local population to accept their own misery? Or is this just the Harkonnens lacking any sense of subtlety whatsoever?
It feels heavy-handed until you view it through the lens of environmental psychology.
Yeah.
And linguistic determinism.
Linguistic determinism.
Yeah. From a totalitarian perspective, this map is actually a masterpiece of psychological warfare.
Really? How so?
Well, the text explicitly tells us that Baron Vladimir Harkonnen personally scrutinized the maps of Giedi Prime.
Oh, so he changed them.
He renamed land features to his own tastes, deliberately adding this melodramatic, grim flair. And the reason goes far beyond personal aesthetic.
So he's institutionalizing despair.
Exactly. By officially naming a place the Isle of Sorrows or the Cliff of Death, the state is embedding trauma into the very dirt of the planet.
So if every time a citizen gives directions or refers to their hometown, they have to use words like sorrow and death.
They're verbally reinforcing their own subjugation. You're trapping their cognition.
That is so dark.
Right. Linguistic determinism suggests that the language we use shapes the boundaries of our thoughts.
So if the only words available are words of suffering and doom, you literally lack the vocabulary to imagine hope or liberation.
Exactly. You aren't just an agricultural worker clocking in for a shift. You're a drone marching to the slave pit mines near Mount Ebony on the Obsidian Plain.
There's no linguistic escape hatch. And what's also striking is that the map is entirely dominated by extraction.
There's not a single natural wonder listed.
None. Just oil depots, metal processing plants, agricultural work camps. The map tells you that the land has zero intrinsic value.
Its only purpose is to be squeezed until it cracks. The geography is a reflection of the ruling philosophy.
The Harkonnens view the planet the same way they view their people, as a disposable battery.
Drain it, burn it out, when it's empty, throw it away. But this philosophy runs into a fascinating wall when we look at the final map. Arrakis.
Dune.
The desert planet.
The single source of the universe's most vital resource, the spice melange. And what jumps out at me immediately isn't what is labeled, but what is actively ignored.
The blank spaces.
Yeah. The maps we have are strictly of the North Polar region and the South Polar region. And right there, splashed across the middle,
There's a massive disclaimer.
the huge disclaimer: all regions between 60 degrees north and 60 degrees south are considered uninhabitable, uncharted wasteland.
They just wrote off the entire middle of the planet.
A multi-galactic empire with space-folding technology just looked at the equator and said, hey, nothing to see here, don't bother.
This is a textbook example of imperial hubris.
How so?
Well, historically, when an empire labels a territory as an uncharted wasteland or terra nullius, nobody's land. What they're actually communicating is quite specific.
They're saying they haven't figured out how to make money off it yet.
Exactly. We haven't figured out how to extract wealth from this area, therefore it possesses no value, and we assume it's devoid of human agency.
They confuse their own ignorance with the reality of the landscape.
Precisely. But as the finer details on the polar maps reveal, the planet is anything but empty.
Right, you zoom in on the North Polar region, and you see these massive geological features born of sheer survival.
The shield wall.
A colossal rock formation protecting the northern cities from the storms, the funeral plain, the Great Flat.
But tucked away in the crevices of the rock outcroppings, you see these tiny markers for siege communities.
The Cave of Riches, Redwall Siege, Tuono Basin, and scattered among them are little triangular markers denoting botanical testing stations.
It's a map of a planet that is actively, aggressively hostile. Humanity is clinging to the cracks in the stone just to avoid being wiped out.
So ask yourselves, consider how the natural landscape of your hometown has directly dictated the local economy and the personality of the people there.
Right, on Caladan, the endless oceans create a society of confident sailors.
On Giedi Prime, the poisoned earth creates broken laborers.
And on Arrakis, the absolute lethal scarcity of water, combined with extreme temperatures, creates the Fremen.
A people so incredibly hard, so adaptable, that they look at the deadliest environment in the known universe and simply call it home.
Which brings us perfectly to our next major focus. We need to zoom all the way in.
Leaving the macro satellite view of the cartographers and dropping right down to the ground level of that uncharted wasteland.
Going into the deep desert of Arrakis.
We're going to experience this hostile environment through the eyes of two incredibly fascinating, contrasting characters.
The Imperial Planetologist Pardot Kynes, and his 12-year-old son, Liet.
The dynamic between these two is the perfect mechanism to understand the true nature of Arrakis. Let's set the stage.
Pardot Kynes is technically an imperial servant, sent by the Emperor to study the ecology.
But Pardot has essentially gone native. He's lived with the hidden Fremen population for 13 years, married a Fremen woman.
To Pardot, Arrakis isn't just a posting, it's the ultimate scientific laboratory.
And his son, Liet, is half Fremen, raised entirely in the deep desert, steeped in this harsh survival culture.
And as our scene opens, the two of them are out in the open desert, miles from safety, when a massive sandstorm begins to bear down on them.
And we have to be clear, this is not just a windy day at the beach. This is a Coriolis storm.
A Coriolis storm. The text describes how winds traveling across the vast flatlands are amplified by the planet's revolutionary motion.
Because there's no topographical friction, right? No oceans or forests to break up the wind.
Exactly. So the wind simply builds and builds. We are talking about sustained gusts reaching 800 kilometers per hour.
800 kilometers per hour. For context, a Category 5 hurricane on Earth has winds starting around 250 kilometers per hour.
And that can level concrete buildings.
Right. This Arrakis storm is more than 3 times that strength. It lifts abrasive sand to an altitude of 2,000 meters.
It's essentially a towering wall of sandpaper moving at the speed of a commercial airliner.
An apocalyptic weather event. Any unprotected flesh caught in that wind would literally be scoured from the bone in seconds.
The physics of it are terrifying. The sand acts like a fluid dynamics nightmare, cutting through metal and rock.
So how do our two characters react? This is where the psychology gets brilliant. Pardot, the brilliant scientist father, is practically vibrating with excitement.
He's glued to his meteorological instruments, taking barometric readings.
He's observing that the storm front stretches across 4 degrees of latitude. He's viewing this unstoppable force of nature purely through the lens of detached data collection.
But his 12-year-old son, Liet, is not looking at barometers.
No, Liet is frantically inspecting this ancient egg-shaped weather pod they found.
Checking the door seals, checking the moisture recycling tubes of his still suit.
And he doesn't call it a Coriolis storm. He calls it by its ancient Fremen name, Hula Sikali Wala, the wind of the demon.
We're witnessing the dangerous dichotomy between theoretical academic knowledge and grounded lived wisdom.
Pardot uses precise scientific terminology. He even corrects his son as the storm approaches.
Right. He tells Liet to use objective and quantitative language, reminding him it's an Imperial report.
And Liet tells his father, a planetologist must use his eyes as well as scientific language. Just look out the window.
Liet views the planet as an active, hungry predator. Pardot views it as a puzzle to be solved.
The text explicitly notes that Liet, at 12, possesses a tightly coiled adulthood. The environment of Arrakis doesn't allow for a protracted adolescence.
If you act like a child in the deep desert, you die.
It forces rapid maturation. So they scramble into this ancient weather pod, and Pardot fires up the pod's suspensors, these anti-gravity devices.
And he deliberately launches the pod straight into the teeth of the storm just to take internal readings.
It is sheer madness. They are instantly battered. The pod is spinning wildly. The hull is cracking under the kinetic bombardment.
The cabin is losing air pressure. And Liet, the 12-year-old, is the one acting like the adult.
Scrambling around, frantically patching microfractures with static foam sealant, shouting that if the hull breaches, they'll be flayed alive.
And Pardot. Pardot is just excitedly logging data on his screen, completely divorced from the physical reality that he's inches from a violent death.
They eventually hit the eye of the storm. Pardot calls it a siege at the center of the storm, a brief moment of absolute stillness.
But it doesn't last. They slam into the trailing wall of the storm, the ancient suspensors give out, and the pod crashes.
Violently back down into the deep desert dunes, they survive the impact, mostly due to the deep sand.
And again, Liet takes charge. He digs them out of the buried pod.
Operating like a seasoned survivalist, he tells his dad to stay put while he scouts the nearby cliffs to find a hidden siege for sanctuary.
He leaves his father sitting safely on the dune.
And this is where this story takes a turn that genuinely made me want to throw the book across the room.
Oh, the suspensors!
Yes, I am struggling to square this. Liet makes it to the rocks, looks back down, and sees the battered pod starting to heave and lurch out of the sand.
Pardot Kynes, left to his own devices for 5 minutes, managed to turn the pod's Holtzman suspensors back on.
In the open desert. Now, Pardot is supposed to be a certified genius, right? The Imperial Planetologist.
The foremost expert on Arrakis ecology.
So why on earth is he turning on a vibrating rhythmic energy field in the middle of the deep desert? Isn't that the equivalent of walking into a bear sanctuary wearing a suit made of raw bacon?
It absolutely is. How can a man whose literal job is understanding this environment be so profoundly reckless?
Right.
It encapsulates the absent-minded professor archetype pushed to its lethal extreme. The text explains it clearly. Pardot is blinded by his own curiosity.
His enthusiasm never dimmed.
Exactly. When he turns those suspensors on, he's not operating as a survivalist, he's thinking as a technician.
He sees a broken machine, realizes he can fix it, and thinks, oh, the automated lift field will save us some manual labor.
But the suspensors emit a rhythmic vibration. And rhythmic vibrations in the deep sand do exactly one thing on Arrakis.
They summon the worms.
The Holtzman field nullifies gravity, but it creates a pulsing vibration that travels for miles. And the apex predator, the giant sandworm, hunts by sensing rhythmic vibrations.
It mimics the movements of prey. Pardot knows this intellectually. He could write a thesis on it.
But in that specific moment, he's trapped in his theoretical bubble. An engineer playing with a toy, completely forgetting he's sitting on a dinner plate.
It's terrifying. Liet sees the pod vibrating and realizes instantly what's about to happen.
The 12-year-old sprints back down the dune, screaming.
Risking his own life. He dives headfirst into the pod, smashes the emergency cutoff switch, and literally drags his genius father out by the collar, yelling, "A worm always comes, now run!"
And they run, frantically scrambling toward the rocky cliffs, the only terrain the sandworms can't penetrate.
And as they pull themselves up the stone, they look back. The sand in the valley begins to churn.
It forms this massive whirlpool, sucking the dunes downward.
And then, exploding out of the center, comes a deep desert sandworm, a leviathan of the sands. It rises up, opens a cavernous mouth lined with crystalline teeth.
And simply swallows the entire metal pod, tons of sand, and every single piece of Pardot's precious equipment in one bite.
A stunning display of nature's absolute dominance. And how does Pardot Kynes react? The man who was seconds away from being digested.
Does he thank the universe? Does he hug his son?
No. He looks at the spot where the pod used to be, slumps his shoulders, and dejectedly says, "We lost all that data."
It's only when Liet pulls out the primary data pack from his pocket, which he saved before running, that Pardot's face lights up with joy.
It is deeply absurd. He cares more about the barometric pressure than his own pulse. But this absurd obsession is exactly why he's so effective at his real job.
Because we learn that this entire expedition is just a cover story.
The source material peels back the curtain to reveal a massive hidden agenda. He isn't just studying Arrakis, he is terraforming it.
This is the grand pivot of the planet's history. The Harkonnens view Arrakis solely as a giant mining operation.
Right, squeeze the spice and retreat to their frigates. But Kynes looks at the desert and sees a canvas.
He's overseeing massive armies of devoted Fremen workers. And the mechanics of this terraforming are fascinating. It's not just pouring water on sand.
It's a methodical process of ecological succession. The text details how they're planting hardy poverty grasses to anchor the mobile sand dunes.
Stopping the relentless migration of the sand. They're establishing groves of cacti and scrub bushes in hidden canyons.
And the question is, how do they get the water for this? They use devices called dew precipitators.
A brilliant piece of survival engineering. They're basically massive aerodynamic traps designed to force a rapid temperature drop.
So even in a desert, the air has trace moisture, right?
Exactly. By creating a sudden temperature differential at dawn, the precipitator forces that trace moisture to condense and drip into an underground catch basin.
Harvesting water from the sky drop by painstaking drop. And it's working. Kynes has established what they call palmaries, flourishing in the unexplored South Polar regions.
The exact regions the Imperial cartographers wrote off as uninhabitable.
Out of sight of the Harkonnen satellites, Kynes is running a lush green demonstration project at Plaster Basin. Flowers, fresh fruit, dwarf trees.
It's an act of ecological rebellion on an unimaginable scale. And this is why the Fremen follow him with religious zeal.
He brought them a vision of paradise. They revere him as their Ummah, their prophet.
He's using the Empire's resources to slowly alter the fundamental physics and biology of the planet.
Though, as we saw with the suspensor pod, his fixation on the grand 500-year vision blinds him to immediate dangers.
Very true.
So we have a deep understanding of Arrakis now, a planet defined by natural, indifferent cruelty. A storm will scour your flesh without malice.
A worm will swallow you whole just because you vibrated too loudly.
But beneath that harshness, a secret communal hope of a green paradise is taking root. Now, I want to transition sharply. We are going to contrast that natural, unthinking cruelty with the meticulously manufactured cruelty of our next location.
We're heading back to that nightmare map, down to the surface of Giedi Prime.
Moving from the open dunes of Arrakis to the claustrophobic, oil-soaked industrial twilight of Giedi Prime.
Specifically, the text takes us to the bleak agricultural village of Dimitri.
The narrative drops us into the perspective of Gurney Halleck. Gurney is only 21 years old, but the text provides a heartbreaking description of him.
His skin is rough, leathery, deeply lined from working the field since he was 8.
Biologically, he's been worn down to look like an old, exhausted farmer. He's trudging home after an 11-hour shift covered in dirt and sweat.
And what have they been doing for 11 hours? Digging deep trenches into rocky, unyielding fields to grow crawl tubers.
Crawl tubers. The agriculture here is not about feeding the population, it's an active tool of oppression.
Let's look at the biology of the crawl tuber. It's a stringy, dense, starchy root vegetable grown primarily for export as cheap animal feed.
But the villagers eat it every single day as their primary food source. Why are human beings surviving on livestock feed?
Because the topsoil of Giedi Prime is ecologically dead. They've wrung every nutrient out of the land.
And the Harkonnens refuse to waste a single solari on importing fertilizer for the serfs.
So the villagers are forced to dig deeper into the rocky subsoil just to find trace nutrients. The text delivers this devastating line. Poor soil leads to poor taste.
It's a calculated regime of nutritional control. The Harkonnens feed their laborers just enough starchy carbohydrate mass to keep their arms moving the shovels.
But they absolutely deny them the dense nutrition and proteins that provide physical vitality.
The environment is being actively starved by the ruling class, and yet, amidst this soul-crushing bleakness, we see Gurney Halleck's fighting back.
But his resistance isn't violence initially. His resistance is music.
This brings up a profound point regarding the function of art under totalitarian rule. Gurney has this old, badly broken 9-string balisette.
A complex stringed instrument. He spent 6 months repairing it to play with 7 strings.
He makes up rhythmic work songs in the fields, writes deeply sarcastic, satirical lyrics to familiar tavern melodies.
He's trying to get his exhausted fellow workers to sing along.
The text gives us the lyrics to one of his songs. O Giedi Prime, thy shades of black are beyond compare. Come ye from far and wide to see what we hide in our hearts and minds. making it all lovelier than before.
It is dripping with sarcasm, a total mockery of the grim industrial landscape.
His friends are terrified. They warn him, Gurney, if the Harkonnens hear your sweet voice, they'll haul you off to Harko City.
But Gurney just brushes it off, joking that the Baron has no ear for music.
We have to recognize that Gurney's music is a potent revolutionary act.
Absolutely. In a fascist system, the state dictates every aspect of your reality. They dictate that your physical body exists purely for labor.
And your internal state should be permanent misery or apathy. By creating art-generating joy, even cynical joy, Gurney is reclaiming a piece of his mind.
Asserting his imagination doesn't belong to the Baron. It's an attempt to build psychological solidarity.
Which is the exact thing the Harkonnens cannot tolerate. And they prove exactly how much they despise that solidarity. Gurney is in the tavern playing his baliset when the heavy door bursts open.
Gurney's 17-year-old sister, Beth, runs in, absolutely terrified.
A military patrol is sweeping the village. A massive prisoner transport vehicle pulls up outside with blinding spotlights.
Through the grates, Gurney sees captive women already swept up from other villages.
Captain Kruby, an officer of the guard, kicks his way into the tavern, looking for more bodies for his quota.
The interaction that follows is the anatomy of a terror state. Gurney steps forward, trying to use logic.
Assuming a social contract exists, he asks, what crimes worthy of arrest? Assuming punishment requires an infraction.
And Captain Kruby delivers arguably the most chilling line in the text.
He looks at him and says, no crimes are necessary.
No crimes are necessary. The purest distillation of arbitrary power. Hannah Arendt noted that true terror is achieved not when the guilty are punished, but when innocence offers no protection.
If there are clear laws, you can follow them and theoretically be safe.
But if no crimes are necessary, you are in a permanent state of psychological freefall. Your existence is at the whim of the state.
Captain Kruby gets annoyed by Gurney's sarcasm. Beth steps forward to pull Gurney away, and simply because she moved, because the spotlight caught her face.
The captain points at her and says, all right, take that one too. Completely unprovoked.
The arbitrary nature of the cruelty is the point. It demonstrates your property, and that is when Gurney snaps.
The farm boy drops his balchet and throws himself barehanded at the armored guards.
Fueled by nothing but rage and crawl tubers, he actually knocks one down, tears another away from his sister, swinging his calloused fists like mallets.
And as he fights, he screams to the tavern for help. We outnumber the bastards.
But he is brutally beaten down by armored gauntlets, ribs cracked, nose smashed, pinned to the dirt floor, bleeding. He looks up at the other villagers.
And the text says they were frozen in their seats, like sheep, motionless as stones.
Gurney is utterly disgusted. The guards drag his sister away, and Gurney staggers up, spits blood, and calls his neighbors cowards. He walks out in contempt.
It's an incredibly frustrating scene to read.
It is. My initial reaction was to agree with Gurney, but thinking about the environment they're trapped in, we really can't judge the villagers so harshly.
No, we can't.
It's easy for Gurney to call them cowards, but isn't this the ultimate example of learned helplessness?
Completely.
The soil is dead, they work 11-hour days, their diet is stringy livestock feed providing zero vital energy.
When your physical body is biologically depleted and your mind is subjected to generational terror where no crimes are necessary.
Where exactly are you supposed to find the physiological energy, let alone the emotional courage, to attack armed shock troops?
You're exactly right. The Harkonnens don't just oppress physically with weapons, they oppress biologically.
They drain the environment, and in doing so, drain the human spirit. The physical exhaustion is a deliberate weapon.
The villagers aren't moral cowards. Their capacity for resistance has been systematically bred out of.
And there's another horrific psychological layer here. Gurney notes that Baron Harkonnen actively recruits his military guards from these very farming villages.
Oh, the capo system.
They take the most desperate, angry young men from the mud, put them in uniforms, hand them weapons, and turn them loose on their own people.
But by elevating a tiny fraction of the oppressed, the state ensures absolute brutality. Those newly minted guards will be vastly crueler than off-world mercenaries.
Because they know what life in the mud is like, and they are terrified of being sent back.
They have to violently prove their loyalty by brutalizing their former peers. This system is perfectly designed to destroy trust.
Leaving Gurney completely devastatingly isolated. It's a phenomenal, heartbreaking scene. And the transition from this moment to our final location is enough to give you whiplash.
Oh, the juxtaposition is extreme.
We go directly from Gurney Halleck, ribs broken, spitting blood on a dirt floor, to the absolute height of grotesque, insulated opulence.
The Arrakis residency for a dinner party.
Pivoting to the people who enforce this misery from afar. We are in the company of Count Hasamir Fenring and his wife, Lady Margot.
Celebrating their 10th anniversary. Count Fenring is the Imperial observer, the Emperor's eyes and ears on Dune.
The contrast in human priorities is staggering. Gurney is fighting for his family's survival. Count Fenring is stressed about the aesthetics of his dinner party.
He's inspecting this exorbitant new botanical conservatory he's having built inside the residency.
An indoor wet planet jungle on a desert planet. Suddenly there's a catastrophic crash. A fully laden suspensor scaffold collapses. Workers are screaming.
The job superintendent is crushed and killed instantly. Medics are pulling bloody, broken men from the wreckage.
And what is Count Fenring's emotional response?
Yeah.
He is profoundly annoyed by the inconvenience.
He murmurs, "Unfortunate timing. I was going to take our guests on a tour."
He says the dead superintendent is lucky he was crushed, considering what Fenring would have done to him for making a mess before a party.
He orders the bodies cleared in exactly 1 hour because he refuses to let construction noise interrupt his dinner.
The laborers aren't human to him, they're malfunctioning equipment.
It perfectly illustrates the impenetrable insulation of the Imperial elite, existing in a bubble of artificial luxury.
Completely disconnected from the human cost. He builds this resource-draining conservatory purely as a display of power.
Which leads directly into the dinner party itself.
Which features one of the most enraging cultural customs in fiction. The wealthy diplomats arrive in tuxedos and silk gowns.
And before entering the dining hall, they stop at these laving basins. Gold-embedded tile sinks filled with warm water.
The guests dip their hands to wash them, deliberately slop excess water onto the polished floor, dry their hands with plush towels, and then just fling the soaking wet towels onto the floor.
A custom suggested by Baron Harkonnen himself.
The explicit purpose is to demonstrate that a planetary governor is so unimaginably wealthy that he cares absolutely nothing for local water shortages.
It's the ultimate display of conspicuous consumption.
Throwing wet towels on the floor on a desert planet, it's like billionaires lighting cigars with $100 bills, but worse because water is biological survival.
But Lady Margot adds a benevolent twist to the custom.
Right, the twist. She lets it be known that after the banquet, the city's beggars are welcome to gather at the servants' entrance and receive any moisture that can be physically squeezed from the dirty towels picked up off the floor.
And how do you interpret that benevolent twist?
Is that actually charity? Or is it the ultimate sadistic psychological flex to remind the poor of their place? You are making them drink your dirty bathwater.
From the insulated perspective of the ruling class, she likely views herself as genuinely magnanimous. She's providing moisture.
That sociologically?
Sociologically and psychologically, it's an act of absolute subjugation. By forcing the beggars to wait outside, desperate to wring out soiled towels, you force them to perform their own degradation.
It violently reinforces the dynamic. We are the source of your life, and we dispense it from our garbage.
A profoundly violent act, perfectly disguised as philanthropy.
That phrasing perfectly captures the sinister tone of this banquet, and that violence is simmering just beneath the surface of the small talk.
Let's look at the hidden power dynamics. Baron Harkonnen is present, leaning on a walking stick, but he does not look well.
He's suffering from a mysterious, degenerative neurological sickness causing rapid weight gain and slurred speech.
And the brilliant dramatic irony is that the architect of his physical destruction is sitting 2 seats away, Reverend Mother Mohiam of the Bene Gesserit Order.
She secretly infected him years ago in retaliation for an assault, and the Baron sits there, oblivious to his tormentor sipping wine right next to him.
It's a literal table of vipers. While the Baron sweats, Mohiam and Lady Margot are having a covert, high-speed conversation using secret finger language.
Mohiam is demanding updates on the Missionaria Protectiva.
The Bene Gesserit are a highly secretive matriarchal order playing a millennia-long political game. The Missionaria Protectiva is a mimetic engineering program.
They seed infectious religious myths and prophecies among primitive planets.
Right, installing a cultural backdoor so a stranded sister can exploit those myths centuries later to gain religious devotion and protection.
Like a galactic IT department installing a master password 1,000 years early. Mahayam and Margot are discussing sisters who went into the Arrakis desert to plant these myths and vanished.
And look at Lady Margot's assumption. She casually signs, maybe the Fremen murdered the women and stole their water.
Which highlights the fatal blind spot of the Bene Gesserit. They are incredibly advanced, but their arrogance makes them underestimate the desert culture.
They view the Fremen merely as primitive, feral scavengers. They can't conceive that the Fremen are a deeply complex society.
They have no idea the Fremen absorbed these women and are orchestrating a planetary ecological revolution. The Bene Gesserit think they're the only players on the board.
And that profound blindness extends to every elite person at that table.
Listen to the diplomatic arguments happening. You have the ambassador from Liet-Kynes and the ambassador from Grumman getting into a screaming match over agricultural sabotage.
Accusations of a biological blight on the Ikazi turnip crop, and retaliation on the Grumman fog tree forests.
Fog tree forests? The text notes fogwood is grown through human thought. A sculptor uses psychic resonance to shape the wood.
The absolute pinnacle of luxury. Telepathic mastery of humanity over nature.
And Count Fenring, at the head of the table, enjoying his expensive turnips, finds the screaming match, thin-skinned and boring.
It is the absolute definition of imperial excess. Screaming over luxury turnips and psychic bonsai trees, completely oblivious to the man at the end of the table actively terraforming the planet they're sitting on.
Planetologist Pardot Kynes is right there. Lady Margot notes with disdain that he looks like a dirty Fremen, wearing a plain tunic with a repair patch.
Surrounded by unimaginable wealth, imported fish, spice-laced wine, Hegel quartz chandeliers.
And he couldn't care less. He only attended to analyze the humidity controls in Fenring's wet planet conservatory.
He just wants to see the indoor plants, and he brought his son.
Weichi, who we know as Liet-Kynes from the storm scene. This 12-year-old boy stands up, raises his glass, and delivers this incredibly bold toast.
He says, "May the wealth you display for us here, with all this food and abundance of water, be merely a pale reflection of the riches in your hearts."
The diplomats cheer, thinking it's a lovely poetic compliment from a quaint local boy.
But Lady Margot, with her training, detects the sharp edge of sarcasm. Liet is mocking them to their faces,
pointing out the horrifying contrast between their grotesque material wealth and their utter moral bankruptcy.
The structural irony of this entire section is brilliant.
Fenring builds a deadly artificial conservatory that crushes workers for vanity. Pardot is building real, life-giving palmeries in the desert to save a population.
The ruling class is obsessively focused on superficial displays, wet towels, fogwood.
And because they're staring so intently at their own afflictions, they are completely blind to the tectonic shifts in power happening in the dirt and sand beneath their feet.
It demonstrates perfectly why these texts resonate. The elite are so insulated, they simply cannot perceive the slow, methodical organizing of the oppressed.
They don't see Gurney Halleck writing songs in the muddy trenches. They don't see Pardot planting poverty grasses. They only see what they want to exploit.
Which brings us to the end of our vast journey today.
We have traversed a massive, complex landscape, examined how a map can be a weapon of psychological despair,
ridden out the lethal 800-kilometer-per-hour storms with an absent-minded genius and his survivalist son,
stood in the bloody tavern of Gidi Prime, watching a community beaten into learned helplessness,
and dined under glittering chandeliers with aristocrats who believe true power is wheezing water on a desert planet.
We've seen that the individuals in the finest uniforms are often the most fragile, while the true architects of the future are the people with dirt under their fingernails and a repair patch on their collar.
It's a profound, deeply layered study in ecology, sociology, and the mechanics of power.
But before we officially sign off, we want to leave you with a final, provocative concept to mull over on your own.
Something that builds on the incredible foundation of this source material.
We've talked extensively about how extreme environments define a society's culture. On Gritty Prime, morality is crushed by artificial scarcity and manufactured tyranny,
turning people into isolated individuals too depleted to defend a young girl.
On Arrakis, morality is dictated by the absolute natural scarcity of water, yet that severe harshness fostered a fiercely loyal, deeply interconnected Fremen culture.
Which leads us directly to a fascinating, almost tragic paradox.
Exactly. Here is the paradox to take with you. If Pardot Kynes actually succeeds in his grand, secret, 500-year dream.
If his poverty grasses and dew precipitators completely terraform Arrakis.
Turning it from a deadly wasteland into a green, lush, water-rich paradise, will the Fremen lose the very cultural strength and unity that the harsh desert forged in them?
If the environment no longer requires absolute discipline to survive, do they become soft?
Can a society built entirely on the shared trauma of surviving hell actually survive the luxury of paradise?
That is the ultimate ecological and sociological question. When you conquer your environment, what happens to the traits that allowed you to conquer it?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We hope it made you think a little differently about the maps you read, the environments that shape you, the mechanics of power, and the true cost of a wet towel tossed casually onto the floor. Until next time.